Okay, it looks like the lobby is filling up, like the room is filling up quickly. In the interest of time, I will kick off the meeting. The first agenda item on our program is welcoming remarks from our board president, Madam Lowani Chiwesakunda, who serves as the board president of the American Chamber of Commerce. Lowani, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Royd, and I hope you can all hear me. Allow me to firstly recognize the presence of the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry, Madam Lillian Walia, the Deputy Chief of Mission from the Zambian Embassy in Washington, Madam Margaret Kapea, colleagues from the USAID, Africa Trade and Investment Southern Africa Buy-in Activity, all invited speakers, the AmCham board, and indeed our AmCham members that are all on this call. I do sincerely thank you all for your time today. As most of you know, the American Chamber of Commerce is a membership organization that has existed for a number of years now and also has the mandate to further trade and investment between Zambia and the United States of America. With representation of over 100 businesses that wish to tap into this vast US market, the Chamber continues to endeavor in making this a reality. The African Opportunity Growth Act, AGOA, is one of the biggest avenues to achieving this objective. AGOA grants sub-Saharan African countries duty-free access to the US market for over 1,800 products, in addition to the more than 5,000 products that are eligible for duty-free access under the Generalized System of Preferences program. As a value add to you, our members, and the wider business community, AmCham is sincerely pleased to host this webinar so as to enhance Zambia's participation in AGOA, thereby increasing exports to the US and unblocking some of the challenges that we face as Zambian exporters, such as stringent standardized measures, certification requirements, and also stiff competition. So it is in partnership with the USAID Africa Trade and Investment Southern Africa Buy-in Activity Program that we hope we are going to be able to equip you all that have joined this webinar with the knowledge and skills to navigate these challenges as they venture into the US market. So once again, thank you to our colleagues from the Zambian Embassy in the US, the Zambian Development Agency, the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry that continues to be a very good friend of the Chamber, for your support in making this a fruitful webinar. So I pass this back over to you, Royd, and I hope this session is going to be as engaging as possible. And once again, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lowani, for those opening remarks. Our next speaker will be Madam Margaret Kapea, the Deputy Chief of Mission from the Zambian Embassy in Washington. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Royd. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by acknowledging Ms. Lowani Chiwesakunda, the board chairperson for the American Chamber of Commerce, Zambia. I also wish to acknowledge our permanent secretary, Mrs. Lillian Walia, who plays a very critical role with her staff in ensuring that Zambia benefits from AGOA. I acknowledge colleagues from the Zambia Development Agency. I acknowledge officials from USAID. I also acknowledge officials, if there are any, from the US Embassy in Lusaka. I acknowledge also the distinguished ladies and gentlemen that are part of this webinar today. Ladies and gentlemen, AGOA has been in existence since 2000. As Ms. Chiwesakunda has said, it is a trade agreement that accords duty-free treatment to all products exported by beneficiary sub-Saharan countries to the United States. Zambia qualifies for both the AGOA and the Generalized System of Preferences, the GPS program. There are a number of products that are listed under AGOA that can be exported to the US by beneficiary countries. Some of the products include footwear, luggage, handbags, watches, apparel, precious stones, minerals, and agricultural products, amongst others. There are many opportunities that Zambia can leverage from AGOA. And in order to ensure the actualization of the benefits of the AGOA, the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry has played a very critical role. And in doing so, they have come up with several strategies to harness Zambia's interests in the US market. It has not been an easy road. The utilization rate has been low, but over time, you can see some improvements as the ministry pushes forward the strategies that they put in place. Some of the strategies are the development of a national response strategy that runs from 2018 to 2025, which was developed together with the USAID hub in Southern Africa. Following the launch of the hub, you can see that there has been an improvement in the utilization rate of AGOA. The ministry also embarked on countrywide sensitization on AGOA in order to get more businesses to be aware of the AGOA. And this seems to be helping in improving the utilization rate. There are various topics that the ministry has touched on as they sensitize the businesses countrywide, some of which include sanitary and phytosanitary, technical barriers to trade, and the standards issue. The overall benefits of AGOA have also been shared with the businesses countrywide. The embassy in Washington, D.C. has been working very closely with the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry, who have linked us to the phytosanitary department in Chilanga in order for the embassy to understand the challenges that Zambia has been facing over time as businesses work towards exporting agricultural products to the US. Let me elaborate a bit on the agricultural products in terms of standard sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Zambia had been facing challenges each time there's an application with regard to export of agricultural products. As we got to discuss with the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry through the Permanent Secretary's Office and the department in Chilanga, it was noted that although the process indicates that you get certification from Chilanga, there was need for our office in Chilanga to engage the office in the US and discuss in detail whatever it was that Zambia wanted to export to the US. There have been presentations made in the past few weeks, some dossiers submitted through the South African office, and we can see that there's progress. The answer actually was just an email away, and it was in networking and engaging that we could get Zambia to move forward. So, without saying too much, as the PS will probably elaborate on some of the issues, there are some key takeaways that I would want you to take away from my welcoming remarks, such as to get us to benefit as a country from AGOA, it is all about a multi-sectoral approach. All stakeholders need to work together. The ministry is there to provide the answers that we need. The embassy is there to also connect the Zambian departments with the US departments here to ensure that we get the necessary approvals and that we get our products listed on the list of AGOA items that can be duty-free. We have a good leadership in the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry. We have a good leadership in the Zambia Development Agency. We have a good leadership in the USAID, in the Southern African region. The chambers of commerce, both the American Chamber of Commerce in Zambia and local chambers, are also key to fostering the much needed collaborations and understanding as we work towards leveraging the benefits of AGOA for sustainable economic growth. We should all be there to respond to questions and to be the solution to unlocking the barriers so as to ensure that Zambian businesses trade under AGOA and benefit from what AGOA has to offer between now and 2025 and going forward, once we get the extension, I'm very positive that we will get the extension. And as we get the extension, Zambia will definitely have more businesses participating in AGOA. As a ministry, I'm sure we'll continue sensitizing and continue encouraging countries to participate in AGOA. Let me end by thanking AmCham once again for inviting me to make some remarks at this very important meeting. I hand over to you, Royd. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very elaborate introduction and remarks. I have just been informed that the acting permanent secretary is trying to log on, having some internet challenges on her side. So, in the interest of time, just a minute. So in the interest of time, I will move it forward. I will move the program forward, and then at the appropriate time when the acting PS is on, we will accord her the platform to make her remarks. But I think in the interest of time, I'll now hand it over to Frances Fraser, who is the team leader of the USAID Africa Trade and Investment Southern Buy-in activity, to give her remarks as well. Madam Frances Fraser, over to you.
Good afternoon. Thanks very much, Royd, and sorry for our very long name. We don't make it easy, and thank you for, for entertaining it. Allow me to please acknowledge the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry, Mrs. Lillian Bawalia, who hopefully will be joining us shortly, the Deputy Chief of Mission for the Zambian Embassy in Washington, Ms. Margaret Kapia, the Board President for AmCham, Ms. Luwani Chibesakunda, AmCham board members and members, the CEO, Royd, and esteemed speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to partner with AmCham on this occasion. It's a great pleasure to be on a panel of so many esteemed ladies. I couldn't help but notice that we seem to be dominating today. The purpose of my few words is just to give some background to the USAID Africa Trade and Investment Program more broadly, but then also the Southern Africa buy-in component specifically. And so I think before going into the first slide on our objectives, I'll just speak to the Africa Trade and Investment Program, which is the implementing arm of Prosper Africa. Prosper Africa is a US presidential initiative that focuses on advancing trade to, from, and within Africa. And it's one of 17 agencies of the US government that specifically focus on driving that. And so, as I mentioned, ATI is then the implementing program, or the activity that then actually follows through on the implementation of Prosper Africa's initiative. Within that, we have what we call buy-ins, and these are sub-projects or components where different activities are funded through different entities. In the case of the Southern Africa buy-in, we have funding from USAID Southern Africa. If you wouldn't mind just flipping back to the previous slide, please. Yes, that's the one. Thank you. We have two key objectives. So as much as ATI focuses on intra-African trade more broadly, our Southern Africa buy-in has a focus on two markets, and that's South Africa and the United States, and specifically utilizing AGOA. And that's how we fit into today and supporting the program today. Within that aspect of our work, we have four key activities that we are focusing on. And you can jump, thank you. The first is the annual program statements, and I'll actually talk about that right at the end of my presentation, as it's a great matching grant opportunity for companies that are interested in exporting to South Africa or the US. The other two are about different, what we call market systems that we see in the trade market or in the trade ecosystem, where there are some constraints, things that are preventing firms from really advancing and growing trade. And there are three. The first is trade promotion, the second trade enhancing services, and then the third is supply chain management. And if you jump to the next slide, I'll talk first to trade promotion, which is really about us helping to close the gap between buyers and suppliers. This is fundamentally, we know there are excellent businesses in Zambia and in our neighboring countries across the continent, but often they don't know how to access buyers in the United States or elsewhere. Similarly, US buyers have an interest in diversifying their sourcing, but don't necessarily know how to find good, reliable exporters across the continent. And so the aim of the work in this trade promotion system is to really close the gap between buyers and suppliers. In that regard, we follow different approaches. We appoint commercial partners that are knowledgeable on specific sectors that can help to create linkages. We support specific trade shows in South Africa and the United States. We're looking to support some buyer missions. And we also work with different AGOA steering committees in the different countries to drive the AGOA implementation strategies. In terms of the next market system we focus on, it's called Trade Enhancing Services. And this is really about helping firms and the market system to understand what it is that's required. Some of what Ms. Margaret was talking about, phytosanitary requirements that are required to operate in the US. There could also be buyer requirements or preferences, like organic certification or a specific preference around environmental safeguards. So this is really about helping companies to be competitive in terms of operating in the US or the South African market. And then the third market system is what we call supply chain management. And in this space, it's really about supporting companies to close deals. So once those linkages have been made, there are constraints that are faced by firms. Some of those could be around trade finance. It could be around aggregating with other suppliers to fill up a container and to get product over to the United States in an economical way. It could be about aggregating for the sake of processing. A good example of that is where we've been working with a company in South Africa to aggregate second grade macadamia nuts, to process those into oil and into energy bars, and those are then exported to the US. Sub-grade macadamias would be very difficult to export without going through that aggregation and processing, and in so doing, we're able to support additional AGOA exports to the US through that aggregation process. So those give a quick insight into some of the different activities that we address. I think lastly, my last slide is just to talk about the annual program statement, which is a matching grant opportunity where we would invest with private sector to fund on a dollar-for-dollar basis any project that would lead to increased exports to South Africa or the United States. So, for example, if a company wants to invest in equipment that would help them to improve their competitiveness or their capacity to the tune of $100,000, we would expect $100,000 from them and $100,000 from us. And in turn, we would want to see quite quickly within the next 2 years exports to South Africa and the US. That would demonstrate a return on investment for that grant. If you're interested in that, we will be sharing these slides afterwards, and you can go and look at our website, atiprogram.com, and then look out for, there's a lot of different grant opportunities. The one I'm talking to is under Addendum 17, so please remember that. And I'll be available throughout the webinar to take any questions at the end if there are any. Thank you, Royd. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Frances, for that. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I have been informed that the Acting Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Nalituva Mwale, is on the call. She will deliver the remarks on behalf of the Permanent Secretary. Madam, over to you, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone.
Please proceed, Madam.
Good afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much. The chairperson of the American Chamber of Commerce in Zambia, the Director General for Zambia Development Agency, the Deputy Ambassador of Zambia in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Trade Attaché to Zambia, senior government officials present, distinguished representatives of the United States Agency for International Development, captains of industry from both Zambia and the U.S., distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Permanent Secretary, Trade and Commerce, Mrs. Lillian Bwalia, it is my singular honor to open this virtual African Growth and Opportunity Act information session being co-hosted by the American Chamber of Commerce and the USAID with support from the Zambian government. I wish to thank the American Chamber of Commerce in Zambia and the United States Agency for Development for organizing this special virtual AGOA information session intended to provide participants with available opportunities under AGOA. From the onset, allow me to also thank the US government for providing preferential market access to AGOA beneficiary countries, including Zambia. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as you may be aware, under the AGOA scheme, beneficiary countries, including Zambia, can export a number of products duty-free from the rest of the world for more than 6,000 product lines. Include crude oil, textiles, and agricultural products, minerals and metals, transportation equipment, and chemicals-related products. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, with the above information, you will agree with me that it is well harnessed. The US market under AGOA has the potential to diversify the Zambian export portfolio, both in products and markets, as well as to increase income and jobs created from exports into the US market as it provides premium prices. It is for this reason that government finds it fit to collaborate with stakeholders in enhancing the utilization of the AGOA scheme, which to some extent is caused by lack of information. The platforms such as this one, and such as this session, are key in disseminating information on the benefits and opportunities that arise from AGOA scheme. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, government is well aware of supply side rigidities that continue to affect the utilization of the AGOA scheme, which include corridors owing to the long this exacerbated by limited capital and productive capacity, inadequate skills to produce according to the requirements of the US market with regard to technical standards and sanitary and sanitary requirements. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is for this reason that the Zambian government, in collaboration with USAID projects, such as the African Trade Initiative, unlock the rigidities through foreign direct investment in strategic sectors, including infrastructure, and specific sectors, including agriculture and mining. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me end by urging all participants to seize this opportunity and share experiences on how to utilize the AGOA scheme, as well as how to overcome some of the challenges that affect exports. AGOA information session. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Madam, for those remarks and for the key points that are raised in there. We thank you for your time once again. At this stage, I would like to invite Tammy Dlamini, who will be presenting on behalf of Cosmas Mamunze, and Tammy Dlamini please take the floor for your presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I hope I'm audible, Chair?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. May I just ask to observe all protocol and move ahead with the presentation. Thank you for the opportunity. Next slide, please. All right. I've been requested to make a presentation on AGOA, which is the African Growth and Opportunity Act. Of course, this is quite a broad subject, so we probably would have or would require half a day to even a day to interrogate this fully. So I'll just go through the presentation, and I will leave adequate time so that we can have a question and answer session, and then also just to find out if there are any pain points or points that US businesses have already identified that that are inhibiting you from fully utilizing AGOA. As already mentioned, AGOA is a non-reciprocal trade preference program, and it affords duty-free imports of eligible products from sub-Saharan African countries. We are talking about 6,400 plus tariff lines. Most of them would be duty-free and largely quota-free. I think the difference in that is there are some products that will still have a quota, even though they might be duty-free, but you will have a limit of how much you can export into the United States within the quota. And then after you have reached that quota, I'll make an example of sugar. A lot of countries that produce sugar, you'll find that they've already reached their quota, and then they apply for out of quota allocations. And if that is allowed, that is also measured. Currently, there are 32 out of 49 sub-Saharan countries that are AGOA eligible. This list goes up and down because under the current framework, reviews are done annually.
Yes, so in the budget.
Tammy, you muted. I think everyone got muted in that muzzling exercise.
All right. Thank you for raising that, Francis. I hope I know where I had stopped, but I was indicating that you'll see different lists of countries, maybe throughout the years, just because the list goes up and down. It's not indefinite, and as you can see, the current cycle is up to September 2025, and that's why we say eligible countries need to take advantage, because our thinking is that if you are able to take advantage of AGOA and go into the market and find your customers, then you are able to have a foothold in the US market. Then even after the Opportunity Act has expired, you now will have customers that you can continue to negotiate terms with. Thank you. Next slide, please. Why would we, as businesses, want to explore the US market? So these are the stats of what has been exported from the US market, but also then stats of what has been exported from Zambia to the US market. But overall, the US market is quite a huge market, and you're looking at a population of around 300 million, and it's it's a market that has a high income and high buying power. So almost everyone wants to be there. So it's very important to focus on the US market. And if you can look at the last sentence, there's still room for Zambia to, although you can see the increase, there's still room for Zambia to increase, to still increase further the exports to the US. And of course, export helps us generate the much needed revenue, especially in foreign currency. Next slide, please. As mentioned, AGOA covers plus minus well over 6,500 tariff lines, and this is spread all over quite a number of sectors. Those are just examples: honey, sauces, dried fruits, macadamia, apparel, leather products, spices. But the list is exhaustive, and what we then advise is if you have a product that you would want to know whether it's AGOA eligible, we do have the country team that will be shown. The contacts will be shown at the end of this presentation. Just ask, and then they'll help you to navigate to say, okay, this is eligible, and the derivative of this is eligible, and if it includes this, it's probably eligible or not. And then again, okay, let's go ahead. And then if we look at the regional performance there, and Zambia is in red, so that's the order of exports. And as I had said, you can see that there is still quite a lot that Zambia can do in terms of exporting to the US, and that is why we are here, so that we can help to navigate. We can help firms to navigate and enable entry into the US market through AGOA. Next slide, please. So if you look at this map, what the program has tried to do is to look at some priority products from the different countries, and to your upper right is Zambia. These have been identified through a number of processes. Firstly, the advantage, what is produced in the country, we look at that, but we also look at the competitive advantage to say, if you export that to the US as a country, are you able to then compete effectively? And that's just a list. Again, this list is not exhaustive. There are new products that you will come up with, and if in doubt, please just ask. So you can see there's honey, dried fruits, moringa, and other commodities that are related. This table, okay, please go ahead. The table shows a further breakdown of the table that we had 2 slides before, that showed how much has been exported from Zambia through AGOA to the US. And this is a breakdown. And you can see that agriculture, commodities, and minerals are taking the lion's share. But still, I believe that especially for agriculture commodities, they still can be a lot of improvement from Zambia. And I think I saw that the textile and apparel is also growing in the country. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits of exporting? Apologies, that's for the slide is supposed to read Zambia, not South Africa. Exporting and utilizing AGOA. And as we know, Zambia is strong in agri-commodities. And out of the 6,400 product lines, over 700 of these are agriculture products. That's raw products and finished products or processed products under agriculture. So this gives the country quite a huge advantage. And then the tariff exemptions increase competitiveness against products from other countries that are non-AGOA eligible. And this, in the simplest sense, your tax or your tariff might go up to 30%. So if you get a customer in the US, you are passing on the 30% reduction in the tariff, because if you're not paying a tariff and your competitor who is in a non-AGOA country is paying the 30%, so that provides a margin for you that you can start negotiating with the customer on, and they can get your products cheaper, and they can in turn also compete well in the US. And then eligibility allows for related trade capacity building. One of the key factors that I also picked up from the earlier conversations is the issue of trade capacity. To say, we want to go into the US, but what are the things that we need to be in the US, and how are we going to compete effectively within the US? So AGOA eligibility allows for that, because whilst you're getting the tariff exemptions, you are able to then get into that market and then start spreading in the market, and also sharpen your trade related capacity. This is very important, especially if you look at the fact that AGOA might not be with us forever. So this sort of gives us good practice to say, let's start using AGOA, and then we can sharpen our competitiveness. And then, of course, exporting to the US, this gives us potential for foreign direct investment and export growth. Part of what you look at as a firm is to say, if I'm exporting commodities, is there any way that I can be able to get US partners who want to invest in the country, and so that we can export the commodities jointly, or just provide that person with much more refined commodities. So it's an opportunity for foreign direct investment. And then, of course, when we export, we expect more jobs to be created, because export in itself opens up the value chain, and it then opens up the avenue for creating more jobs, but not just jobs. It also opens up the avenue for creating skills-based jobs. And then lastly, exposure to the US market under AGOA creates relationships that we expect to continue even after this program has come to an end, if it does. Quite important. There was a discussion on sanitary and phytosanitary requirements, and this being part of the barriers to entry for a lot of exporters into the US. One of the things that you really don't want to happen to you, you don't want to dispatch a container and then it's flagged in the US, whether at customs in the US, whether that then ends up in that container being released, but the time, the confidence that you have with your customers, and also product deterioration might occur. The worst is you don't want a container that is totally refused import into the US. This table just shows import refusal for 2021 and 2022. And I think the next slide will show some of the reasons for refusing import by US border customs authorities. So this table just shows that Zambia had 2 refusals over a period of 2 years, which we may say it's good, but it might also be related to the fact that you're not exporting a lot. But it's very important that once you prepare for the US market, avoid having your containers impounded or refused import into the US. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, I didn't, the slide is not there, but let me also, just before I come to this one, look at the issue of refusal. There are quite a number of reasons. Some of them have been cited. The first one is you haven't followed the right procedures for sanitary and phytosanitary requirements that are needed by the US customs, border customs officials. Documentation is also quite frequent in terms of import refusal, which if you do things right, you shouldn't have that problem. And then product deterioration, in simple terms, product that has gone bad, you are refused entry. But also things like labeling, mislabeling of products, containers that are not allowed in the US. So those are all the things that you will need to learn about. And also, if you get a customer, you need to ensure that you are getting that right and understand what the customer requires, but more importantly, understand what the US customs requires of you. In conclusion, as an exporter to the US, firstly, you should know your market. We didn't go into detail on how you do that market assessment. I think some of our webinars cover that, but also the team will assist you. The team in Zambia will assist you, and where they need assistance, they'll reach out. And then spot the market gaps, know your customers, know your product capabilities, do not over-promise and under-deliver. And then know the rules and AGOA regulations. There's always a partner agency in the country that is responsible for AGOA regulations and also allowing you export from Zambia to the US. So those are the people who will issue you with your export permits and also issue you with your proof of origin. And then, again, never take an order that you cannot fulfill. Chair, let me end there and then allow you to help us with the questions and requests for clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. You've actually just reminded me that I did not give the sort of housekeeping on questions and answers at the beginning of the presentation. Allow me to do that now. Guests, you've got two options for question and answer. The first one is to use our Q&A section. It is right next to the chat. If for some reason your Q&A option is disabled, please type your question in the chat box. And then the third and last option is to raise your hand during Q&A session. I will not take questions at this point to allow the program to run. Our next presentation is from Lauren Handel, the principal attorney at Handel Food Law. She specializes in helping companies with their compliance, companies and businesses looking to export to the US. So she will give us information around how to ensure that we are compliant. Lauren, over to you.
Thank you. I trust you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Great. Okay. So thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be with you today. And just brief background, I have a small law firm. I'm based in Arkansas, and all of my clients are in the food and beverage industry. Many of them are international companies looking to get into the US market. And there are three main areas that I help clients with, which are regulatory compliance, contracts, and intellectual property. We could go to the next slide. So I wanted to talk about, and we can just go ahead to the next slide, please. There's three topics for today in the limited time that we have. First, I wanted to just kind of give an update on some current and emerging regulatory issues for U.S. food regulation. Could you skip ahead to the next slide, please? Then also to talk about food labeling and advertising risks. And then finally, very briefly, an overview on U.S. trademark protection and what some key considerations for that process. Next slide, thank you. So the Foreign Supplier Verification Program, this is actually not new law. It was part of the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011. However, full compliance with the regulations was only required in 2020. And FDA has only in the past few years really started to increase its enforcement of this rule. So this is a regulation that you'll need to know about because it will very much affect your customers in the United States who would be designated as the importer of record of your products. What the rule requires is that importers of food products must verify that their foreign suppliers are complying with US food safety standards. And so the implications of this is, beyond general industry practices, which have been in place for a long time among more sophisticated businesses. Now, even very small buyers in the US are required to ask for records, conduct audits, ask for third-party food safety certifications, and do other activities to really look into the safety and compliance of their suppliers. Next slide, please. FDA's traceability rule. This is also enacted under FSMA 2011 statute, but this regulation has not yet gone into effect. So compliance is required in January 2026. And so the industry is really ramping up now to figure out how it will comply with this rule. The regulation applies to certain kinds of products that are higher risk for contamination and where there have been more frequent incidences of recalls due to pathogens. So things like soft cheeses, certain kinds of fresh produce, nut butters, fish and shellfish are categories of foods that are covered by this regulation. And what it requires is that what are called key data elements, certain information be recorded and then passed along at certain critical tracking events in the production and supply chain. And the whole idea is to make it much easier in the event of an outbreak to be able to trace the source and contain an outbreak. Chemical contaminants are an emerging area, growing area of regulatory attention, both at the federal and state level in the United States. Chemicals that are called PFAS chemicals for short, I won't try to say the full chemical name. This is a group of, I believe, 12,000 or so chemicals that have been used in all kinds of materials in industry, including in food packaging, and that are have been discovered to be really pervasive in the environment and that raise health concerns and concerns for the environment. And as a result, FDA encouraged industry and obtained a voluntary agreement of manufacturers in the United States to phase out the use of PFAS chemicals in grease proofing that's applied to food packaging. At the state level, California this year has banned PFAS chemicals in food packaging, and there are other states that are considering similar bans. And just last month, FDA issued an import alert. So you heard about import detentions from the last speaker. This import alert allows FDA to designate certain products or certain companies on what's called a red list if FDA finds that their products contain elevated levels of PFAS or other chemicals. And then once on that list, products will just be detained without any requirement for physical examination or sampling. There's also been increased attention on heavy metals in food. So late last year, there were incidents of hundreds of children who were found to have elevated levels of lead in their bodies, and that was traced back to exposure to lead in cinnamon that had been used in applesauce pouches. And that really brought a lot of attention to the issue of heavy metals in foods. A few years ago, there had been testing of baby foods that found elevated levels of heavy metal. And as a result of that, FDA has now proposed action levels for lead in baby foods. So this is an area where states are now starting to pay attention to. New York has set regulatory limits for lead, arsenic, and cadmium in spices. California is requiring testing for heavy metals, and I expect to see more action around heavy metals. With regard to the organic regulations, there is new regulations that took effect last month. And what's important to know is that there are now more requirements, more hurdles for participation in the organic marketplace. And a significant development is that now exporters and importers are required to have certification under the organic rules. And that's even if those entities do not physically handle the products. Import certificates are also now required for every shipment of organic products, certified organic products entering the United States, which was not previously required for every shipment. Shifting to food labeling and advertising risks. Labeling problems can also be a reason for the detention of products. It is important to be aware that US consumers are very interested in more nutritious, healthy products that are better for the environment. And so there are many companies that want to take advantage of this and really distinguish their products as being better than their competitors in one way or another. What's important to know is that in some cases, there are regulations that apply to these kinds of claims. And so the slides show some examples of FDA regulations for particular kinds of claims, such as claims about the nutrient content of a product. FDA is in the process of revising its definition or criteria for when the term healthy can be used with respect to a food product. Gluten-free has a definition. It's absolutely prohibited to make any claims that a product is useful in preventing or treating any kind of disease. There are certain approved health claims, but you have to follow the language and conditions in the regulation that sets the criteria for those claims. If you have adequate science to back them up, you're allowed to make claims that are called structure function claims, which are things like calcium builds strong bones. It's a claim that a nutrient or an ingredient has an effect on a structure or function of the body. And then, of course, there are regulations around when products can be represented as organic. In addition to the regulatory issues around labeling and advertising, a big driver of compliance in the United States is the risk of getting sued. So we have an extremely litigious culture here, and there is a very active segment of the class action plaintiffs bar that has made it its business to target food and other consumer products for labeling and advertising that they allege is false or misleading in some sense. And so they bring cases on behalf of an entire class of consumers. So it could be every consumer in the United States who's purchased the product over the last few years, or it could be consumers in a particular state. And so apart from the regulations, even if a product complies with FDA labeling regulations, there's still the potential that under state law, it could be deemed false or misleading, and that would be a cause of action that would enable plaintiffs' lawyers to obtain damages on behalf of all of the consumers who've been affected. So this slide shows some of the more popular targets, the kinds of labeling issues that get people in trouble. If we could just go back to that briefly, that last slide. Claims about products being natural has been maybe the biggest one of all of these, although that's dying down, but it could also be claims that a product, or even just representations, the overall messaging that a product is healthy. That's what I called health washing, that it's nutritious or good for you, especially if a product has elevated or relatively high levels of added sugar or fats. That's an issue. Claims that a product has maybe represented as having more of a particular ingredient, a key ingredient, something that's desirable, than maybe it has. Environmental and animal welfare claims, so general kind of greenwashing is the category. And it's important to be very careful about that. Slack fill, or what President Biden recently called out as shrinkflation, it's the potential for consumers to be deceived about how much of a product is in the package, that they might get less than they expected to get. And then also representations about the place of origin of a product. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so it is very important to be aware as a litigation risk, if you have a product that will be sold in the state of California, that California has its own law called Proposition 65 that requires warnings on products if they have levels that exceed a designated safe harbor of certain chemicals. For foods and agricultural products in general, heavy metals are the biggest issue when it comes to Prop 65. What you need to know is that the law has what's called a bounty hunter provision that allows plaintiffs' lawyers to bring a suit to enforce the law. And these are class action lawsuits. They are extremely active in this. And so it's very important to know if your product may have a chemical on the Prop 65 list, to do testing to see if a warning is required and make sure that that warning is provided. Buyers in the US will require their suppliers to comply with this, even if those suppliers are technically exempt from the law. And so if the US-based buyer gets sued because there's not a warning on the product, they will require you to defend and indemnify them. Next slide, please. Okay, so very briefly on trademark protection. I know we're running low on time. The United States is a first to use jurisdiction for trademark law, which I understand is different than Zambia. So what that means is that you have priority in trademark rights in the United States by being the first to use the trademark, as opposed to being the first to register a trademark. To register a trademark in the United States, there are three potential bases if you're a company outside the United States. And so one could be based on your actual use of a trademark in US commerce, meaning you're using the trademark in connection with goods or services that you sell in the United States. You could also register based on your registration in another country that has a treaty with the United States, or based on your international registration with WIPO through the Madrid Protocol. I put asterisks on the foreign registration and the Madrid Protocol because it's very important to realize that having the registration is not in itself enough. In filing the application, you are representing that you at that time have an intent to use the trademark in commerce at the time you're filing the application, so that in the near future, you plan to be using the trademark in commerce with all of the goods or services that are listed in the application. So while at the time of registration, if it's based on a foreign trademark registration, you don't have to have use in commerce, you will need to have that use soon, otherwise the registration becomes vulnerable to cancellation. I will leave it there and stay on the line for any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren, for that presentation. Our next presentation will be from Celia Fenter, Chief Product Officer at OnTech. Celia, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, although it's good morning here in Dallas, Texas. Thank you for the opportunity. It is certainly a pleasure to be part of this webinar today. The CPG landscape in the US is both dynamic and demanding. Entering the US CPG space as an international brand proves to have its own unique dynamic as well. With that said, I want to acknowledge my bias as a project manager. However, I do believe the complexities faced when launching an international brand in the US is best managed by applying true program management principles. Today, I will highlight what this approach entails by reviewing the following what is program management? What are some of the challenges when launching an international brand in the US? And then how program management can address these challenges. So firstly, you can move on to the next slide, please. What is program management? Program management involves coordinating multiple projects and initiatives within a cohesive program to achieve strategic objectives. It's about overseeing the big picture, aligning efforts, and ensuring everything works together towards the common goal. Next slide. So what are some of the challenges that we face? Launching a new CPG brand in the US market presents a vast array of challenges. But as I mentioned before, launching an international brand layers a unique set of challenges. Here are a few challenges to take note of. First one there, intense competition from the established local brands. The competition is fierce in the US and usually is backed by dollar funding and a strong local team. Number two, complex supply chain and distribution networks. Three, like the previous speaker, Lauren just mentioned, the regulatory considerations and compliance requirements. Number four, expensive sales team. Boots on the ground in sales are necessary, but is truly expensive in the US market. And then lastly, a breakdown in communication, specifically when the team working together are located on different continents and time zones. Next slide. So how does program management approach or address these challenges? If I can summarize it in one sentence, I would probably say by proper planning and adjusting plan based on the data. However, the program management approach is about more than just this. It's about strategic planning and cross-functional alignment, optimizing your resources, risk mitigation, performance monitoring and controlling, and stakeholder communication. So to further define this, please move to the next slide. Program management facilitates the alignment across various functions that we know are important in launching a brand. For example, your marketing team, sales, supply chain, and finance. Ensuring everyone is working towards the same objective. This alignment minimizes silos and fosters collaboration. Next is optimizing your resources. With limited resources, efficient program management ensures optimal utilization of budgets, time, and manpower. It prioritizes initiatives based on impact and feasibility. The focus is truly to utilize your internal team first, and then identify gaps and resources that may be needed. In looking at risk mitigation, program managers constantly monitor the entire program to identify potential risks and roadblocks early on is key here, so that the appropriate mitigation strategies can be implemented. This is a proactive approach to minimize disruptions and lowers the total effect of that roadblocks have on the project. So as an example, I just added in this slide, sorry, just go back to the previous slide. I just added the sales component of identifying roadblocks, but also to determine exactly where those roadblocks happened. Thank you. Next slide. Performance monitoring and program controlling. The program management approach establishes metrics and reports to track progress, evaluate success, and adapt strategies as needed. In the CPG world, our focus are mostly on the sales dashboard that tracks your sales activity and status, the back office dashboard that monitors the back office tasks and status, and then your marketing dashboard to track the effectiveness of your brand communication strategy. Lastly, stakeholder communication. The program management approach includes robust communication strategies to keep stakeholders informed and engaged. Communication strategies include written communication, such as the program management plan, which is an integrated plan that outlines requirements, milestones, and resources. Visual communication includes your dashboards, your client dashboards, real-time dashboards with update and on the key components necessary to implement in the project. And then verbal communication, which would be your stakeholder meetings, ensuring alignment of backlog activities, status, and program priorities. Clear communication fosters support and buy-in for the entire team and is critical. In conclusion, the US, you can move to the next slide, thank you. In conclusion, the US market is an ever-changing business landscape. In this landscape lies great opportunity, but also costly risks if the right resources are not planned for, monitored, and controlled. As on DAC, we evolved our approach to shift from an internal sales team model to a comprehensive program management approach. That serves as the central command in the US to drive project and program success. By applying program management principles, we drive alignment of key program components necessary to achieve objectives, maximize efficiencies, and ultimately reduce your risks. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Celia, for that presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to have your questions ready. We are moving into the last part of this webinar, which is a case study provided by, presented by Meet Pandolika from Luano Honey. Luano is a Zambian product that has found success in the US. So please pay attention to this session, as this is an actual case study of a Zambian product that is making inroads into the US. Meet, over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Meet from Luano Honey, and we're an exporter to the US. I'm just here to basically tell you a bit of my journey and see if you guys have any questions regarding it. And yeah, so we started exporting to the US in 2022. So we started to trial the market by sending our goods by air freight to African shops in the West Coast. And once we saw that the product was good enough and you know, there's interest with people wanting to buy it, this year we started exporting container loads to the US to sort of pack in a bioplastic for resale in American retail. Some of the things we faced along the way, definitely label compliance is a big deal there. Also, logistics from Zambia is it's longer than any other most places in Africa. So the transit time for goods to get from Zambia to the US is almost like 3 to 4 months for a full container load. So yeah, it's a pretty big strain on your finance, because no US buyer, from my experience, no US buyer would be willing to purchase directly from Zambia, which is why we had to send our stock, position it in America, pack it in America, and sort of like supply ShopRite from a central, sort of like supply the retailers from a central location, kind of like what we're doing with ShopRite in Zambia, from our warehouse. So yeah, that's one of the challenges for sure. Another thing is import regulation to look out for. You need to find out what products, what HS code your products fall under, so that you're able to appoint an import agent in the US to help you bring in the goods into the country. It's fairly easy exporting from Zambia. It's a standard procedure in terms of paperwork. You do though need to basically, how can I explain it? You need to have your facility here in Zambia, or the exporting company here in Zambia, registered with the FDA in America. And there's an online portal and everything for that to sort of assist. It's not really difficult. Also, the exporting procedure as well is it's different in the sense that you have to log into the FDA portal and submit your bill of lading or your transport documents as sort of an arrival notice before your goods arrive into the US. Though now, initially we were doing it ourselves, but now we found a good enough import agent that handles all of that for us. But yeah, it also costs money. On the positives of the US market, the market is huge. There's definitely potential for all kinds of products. It might be difficult to initially find your market, but there are enough people there for all types of products. You just need to, figure out a way to get it in front of them and market it in front of them. Thirdly, any US buyers, the rate of default is very low compared to other countries. Also, the price, you'll get a preferential price compared to China, India, South Africa. But yeah, the cost of doing the business is pretty high as well. And so far, we have about 40 tons of honey in our warehouse in Baltimore. It's our own facility. We've set up our own micro business there in Baltimore to sort of help with packaging and distribution into retail, as well as e-commerce. What else? Yeah, and I would recommend that you continue, if you are interested in exporting to the US, you continue following the Trade Hub. They can assist a lot. We've gone to multiple food shows with them, and that's how you end up meeting buyers. You're not going to find buyers sitting in Zambia and emailing and things like that. In the US, we've seen that face to face and an in-person interaction makes a world of difference when someone sees that, oh, okay, it's not only just some random person from Africa emailing me. Just because of the stigma that we have of dealing, of doing business with Africa. But it is getting better, slowly but surely it is getting better, but it's not yet like supplying from India or China or Europe or anything like that. Even South America has a preference of supply over Africa. The other thing is that, yeah, you'd want to use the AGOA trade protocols to give you added advantage, because all our goods from Africa to America, most of them, I won't say all of them, most of them are duty free, and you need your HS code to sort of look up what category or what sort of duties apply to your product. But 90% of products from Africa to the US are duty free, and if you need to bring in technology from the US or anything really, raw material or technology into Africa, it's also duty free. And that trade protocol is there to give us Africans, also the Americans, an advantage against other global market players who have to pay higher duties based off of their origins. And so, yeah, that's basically the gist of it. And if anyone has any questions, I'd happily answer.
Thank you, Meet, for that presentation. We'll now move over to the Q&A session. I will allow people to raise your hand if you have a question, and mute your mic, and then ask your questions. So please, the floor is open for questions. Please Raise your hand, say which organization you're from, and ask your question. Okay, it looks like there's no questions here. Let me take a question from the Q&A section. There's a question here. It says, are there platforms set for free exchange of information between regulators, exporters, and buyers? Further to this question, are guidelines simplified and easy to understand? The question did not specify who it's addressed to, but anyone of the presenters is free to take this up.
Royd, I think that's probably for me. This is Lauren Handel. So regarding platforms, not to my knowledge, so I am not aware of communication platforms for sharing information between regulators, exporters, and buyers. Within industry, there are many different support groups or networking groups, and certainly even on social media where people can get information. As far as easy to understand US guidelines for regulations, I mean, I'd say no to that too. I'd say our government tries in terms of issuing guidance documents and small entity compliance guidelines to put out in plain English publications explaining the rules. Overall, I don't find them very easy to understand, which is why I have a job as a food lawyer, being somebody who can translate these things for people.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Lauren. Is there any questions from the audience?
Maybe from my end, this is Tammy. From my end, we do provide information as required. It might not be packaged to put everyone in the same platform or room, but if you go to the website agoa.info, it provides quite a bit of information, and we do have an AGOA manual that also guides on products and some of the regulation. It's quite light, but it gives you a pointer. And then there's quite a number of sites that you can access, but go into agoa.info and it does also give you reference to other sites that you can then access.
Okay, thanks, Tammy. I take it the presentations were very clear. If we do not have any questions, I'll take that as a good sign. I'll look at the glass half full rather than half empty. At this stage, if there's no questions, I will hand over to Itumeleng Mochekoane, Country Program Assistant from USAID Trade and Investment Southern Africa Buying Activity. I'm sorry if I butchered your name, Itumeleng.
Don't worry, I forgive you.
Cool.
But I think you did quite a good job. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone. I think this was an amazing time that we had. I just hope that we learned as much as we needed to. So my job is very easy. It's just to get feedback from you. We have programs like this that we do in Zambia and other countries as well, and your feedback is very, very crucial to us, very, very important for us to keep on improving. So please check in the chat box. I have just shared a link to the feedback form. It's very quick and simple. There are just 2 questions and a bit of information about you that we would like to get. So please do fill it out, and I'm going to give you that time to just fill it out. I think it should take maximum 2 minutes. So I am able to see the responses coming. So please do make sure that you respond right now. And I will be giving you feedback as to how many responses I'm seeing. Please do. If you have any questions, if you do not see the link or any challenge that you have, please let us know.
Great, thanks, Itumeleng.
Thank you.
Lastly, let me hand over to Jeanette Nyangwe, who is the country representative for the US-Africa Trade and Investment Southern Africa buy-in activities. Jeanette, over to you for your closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Roy, and good afternoon, colleagues, once again. Thank you all to all our distinguished participants from AmCham Zambia, Lowani Sakunda, the Acting Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Nalitumba Mwale, and the Deputy Ambassador for the Zambian Embassy in Washington, Mrs. Margaret Lukia. Your valuable insight and engagement today, we thank you for that. A special thanks also goes to our presenters, Lauren Haddell from Haddell Food Law and Celia Venter from ONDEC for sharing their expertise and perspective on exporting to the US. As we conclude, colleagues, let us carry forward the momentum gained today to further leverage AGOA's potential for economic growth and development in Zambia. Let us also continue collaborating and implementing the strategies discussed to maximize the benefits of this important trade agreements. Looking ahead, I'm delighted to announce upcoming events that are being hosted by USAID Africa Trade and Investment, Southern Africa buy-in, to further explore opportunities under AGOA. These events are Understanding and Unlocking US Markets, a webinar series, part 5, which will take place on April 30th. And in June, we have the Summer Fancy Food Show, which will take place in New York from June 23rd to 25th. And I also want to thank everybody on the call for having joined this webinar. Please do feel free to reach out to us. We're available to provide information on exporting to the US. As much as you need our support, we're here for you. Next slide, please. The key contacts for USAID ATI, Southern Africa buy-in, are the ones that are projected right now on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. Thank you to everyone who attended the call. Thank you for your time. We wish you a productive rest of the day. And from the American Chamber of Commerce in Zambia, thank you to our members for attending, and we continue to further engagements with you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.